Hello, and welcome to Anime Audio Commentary. Today I'll be commenting on Episode 7 of Outlaw Star. If you'd like to watch along, then start watching now. So, last we left off, the crew of the Outlaw Star protected one Fred Lowe, a sort of shipwright, I guess, or a weapons dealer or something. Essentially protected him from an assassin, and in so doing, Jean essentially received only a 30% discount. So, in total, Jean has gained the enmity of an assassin and put himself in a whole bunch of debt because that grappler ship, you can't arm it for cheap. Now, the interesting thing here is that the thing being explained to us is that there are various pirate factions sort of vying for control of space and, doing stuff. That's kind of interesting, and I feel like learning about this, it's going to be pertinent to this episode. One of the other things that didn't really get resolved was that Suzuka, the assassin, she was hired by someone, but whoever that person is, we don't know much about who had done it or for what reasons he wanted Fred Lowe dead. Perhaps we'll find out what's going on in this episode. Ooh, so before Jean can do anything interesting like finding treasure to pay off his debts, he, seemingly has to take off from the planet, which, that's probably a pretty big deal. I feel like of all the things you do in a spaceship, taking off and landing are probably the two most critical and dangerous things. In the previous episode, we saw Jean land the Outlaw Star, and it was, a bit tenuous. He managed to do it, but only just. Now, I feel like the process of landing is probably more difficult than taking off. But that said, taking off is clearly a bit of an issue. Not to say that it's entirely beyond Jean, but there are clearly some nuances here that he hasn't yet grasped and is, causing a bit of an issue. Some of it, I think, is Gilliam, the shipboard AI not being remarkably helpful, which I guess means he's, pretty intelligent. Like, I feel like the mark of a true artificial intelligence is that they aren't actually very helpful. Okay. So I guess this was a training simulation, which probably doesn't bode well for the real thing when it will eventually happen. Even if Gilliam's rationale is good, he's essentially throwing curveballs at Jean, because if stuff starts rocketing fanwards while you're actually piloting, you gotta be on top of that, otherwise things get very messy very quickly. Because, it's one thing if you're flying a plane, like, piloting a spaceship being somewhat analogous, but the difference between a plane and a spaceship is that a spaceship is sitting on a whole lot more highly combustible material. Assuming, of course, that rockets work how I understand them to work. I'm sure there's some liberties taken with the science fiction, given that there is, FTL travel or close to it. But I feel like once you get off planet side, like, you can sort of get away with a bit less in terms of propulsion. Now, the real important question here is, did Gene buy apples or tomatoes? Because if that's a tomato, he looked to be about to just take a big old bite of that, and that is, frankly, pretty gross. But Jim, meanwhile, his car's been impounded. And I find it interesting that the car belongs to Jim, seeing as how Jim is, a kid. I don't think it's been explicitly stated how old he is, but he isn't an adult, that's for sure. So the idea that he owns a car is kind of interesting. That and how he seems to be the driver of the car more often than not. Now, despite all that, it seems though a shadowy figure is sort of listening in on Jim and Gene, and, if I had to guess, this figure is either related to pirates or the assassination attempt on Fred Lowe. And it could be one and the same, really, when you get down to it. Ooh, okay. So, based on what this bartender's saying, the general assumption is that if pirates are after you, you're as good as dead. And seeing as how Gene had been off-world for a little while, the assumption is that he probably had not survived. Oh dear. So unfortunately, this waitress seems to have latched on to the idea that Melfina is competition, which, isn't strictly true, I imagine, but, man, it's unfortunate that her presence is already sort of causing issues. Ooh. So Gene's being evasive, I don't like what's going on here, but I'm not going to talk about it to any real degree. That's how things aren't good. I guess I would have to assume Gene's concerned about Suzuka, and, I guess any future, confrontations. But that said, she's not the only person he has to worry about. There's also, the Katarl, Aisha Clan. And to be fair, she is stuck on that space station doing dishes, last we saw her, but, I wouldn't put it past her to attempt to get passage to where Gene is to, try and kill him. Ooh. So, Gene and Jim, they just have ongoing money issues, it seems, which, that really is kind of like the grand interminable problem for everyone and everything. And I guess the question is, how are they going to get money in the first place? Now, unfortunately, Melfina has offered her services, but, I don't know. So they're just sort of like farming her out to work at the bar, I guess, as a cook, I suppose that'll get you a little bit of money, but, like, in the quantities they need, I feel like, they'd be better off looking for, like, buried treasure or something. Alright, so Jim's talking sense here. We can't think too far ahead, looking up at the stars and space and all that. We kind of have to worry about our debts here and now. Oh, wow. I guess I hadn't really realized it, but Jean is, rather scarred, which I guess sort of implies that there are a lot of stories here we're not yet privy to. Because, you don't just, come by a lot of scars without doing something. So, Jean is seen fit to talk to Melfina. She's not sleeping. She's something of an interesting character because we know that she's an android, but she's a bio-android, which I assume to mean that she's, organic, just not naturally born or made. That kind of has to suck a fair bit if you have all the sort of trappings of humanity without being human in the conventional sense. It's like, what's the point, I feel like it would almost be better to be a machine. Ah, dear Jean. So the poor guy, he just can't pass up an opportunity, but at the same time, it isn't the time for this sort of thing. Melfina is fairly human in the sense that she's suffering just like anyone else would, so I feel like the best thing you can do is just kind of leave her to it, Wow. Isn't it, frankly convenient that Gilliam is unable to help repair the ship in this gravity? If it were in 0 Gs, he could help, but, no can do in Earth's atmosphere. Oh dear. So if things weren't bad enough with Jean repairing the Outlaw Star, he's being summoned to the business office, presumably the spaceport, to talk about things, which, it's probably a monetary dispute, and probably one where, Jean owes more people money. Alright. So Jim is, I guess working on a tractor of sorts, He's kind of doing a bit of a scummy thing where it's oh, everything's shot, but we just happen to have something for cheap, Oh, here we go. Yeah, I guess, Jean's suffering about, dock fees and all that for the Starship. Oh dear. So it's never a good thing when you have to promise to pay for any overages. I feel like there's gonna be some for sure, and they're not gonna be cheap. I imagine if you're taking up a valuable parking space at a spaceport, then fees are gonna stack up pretty quickly, and they're gonna be many, many figures. So unfortunately, it seems like things have hit the fan. That pirate who was watching them has decided to make his move. He's seemingly being kept out of the Outlaw Star for now by dint of Gilliam, but I'll take that back. Guess he got in after all. It's deeply unfortunate that Melfina is the only one on board because she doesn't really strike me as combat capable. And even if she were, this intruder is clearly a tough customer, So now it seems like things are devolving into a bit of a cat and mouse game. Gilliam's kind of keeping Jean updated on where the intruder is, but this guy's clearly a highly mobile, highly acrobatic figure. And therefore, things are going to get messy. Because I feel like Jim's no help, but Jean's not going to be able to pin him down in one spot. Although seeing as how this guy looks entirely different, he's more of a bruiser, really. It seems like these pirates are working in tandem. Or perhaps maybe they're competing with one another. Well, never mind. I guess Suzuka has intervened on behalf of Melfina. Now, I suppose it's interesting that Suzuka has decided to intervene. I guess because honor demands she kill Jean, but intervening on behalf of Melfina, on the one hand I get it, because she's clearly an innocent, but on the other hand, why would you want to do Jean Starwind a favor when, you've sort of pledged that you're gonna kill him? I mean, I guess it sort of indicates to me that Suzuka is far more honor-bound than one would normally assume of an assassin. Honorable is not normally a trait I would ascribe to contract killers and the like. Ooh. Jean's got some bad news for these pirates because he seems unaware that Hilda is dead. Although, I guess it doesn't really matter because he sort of lured Jean into a trap anyways. I mean, honestly... Okay, well, Jean's just not willing to share information. I feel like just, dropping the information that Hilda is dead is probably the best move he has in his arsenal right now. Just, throw the guy off guard and, use that opportunity to act. Suzuka, at the very least, seems to be faring much better than Jean, because, while Jean is forced to run away from the pirate and all his minions, Suzuka's just fighting this guy one-on-one. Now, Suzuka is making, I suppose, a bit of a rookie mistake again. She's not immediately leaping right to her special techniques, which was kind of the mistake she made with Jean. Although this time she claims she's just warming up, so, hopefully she has learned that sometimes it really is better to just kill now and ask questions later. Or, not at all, really. I feel like killing pirates is kind of a straightforward business. You don't need to ask too many questions. So I take it from that trail of blood on the ground that Jean has been wounded to a degree, which, doesn't bode well. He's giving a trail to the pirates even as he tries to escape, and I feel like, it would be in his best interest to see as little of them as possible. Now, Suzuka, at the very least, she seems to be, if not definitively superior to her opponent, she seems to be doing better than Jean. I guess it is kind of interesting that, this pirate, despite being a really beefy, bulky type, he is also a sorcerer of sorts, I guess as evidenced by his chanting. Well, for all his sorcery, it didn't seem to do him any good here. Suzuka just, killed him, I guess. Aw, Melfina, what are you doing? Inviting Suzuka into the shop to wait for Jean. I guess, Suzuka helping out, that indicates she might have had a change of heart here, but at the same time, I feel like Melfina's being far too trusting by inviting in the assassin that she knows is after, her friend and associate. Now, it seems as though Jean has pulled off a rather cunning bluff, setting up a decoy, and then when all the pirates and minions are busy just blowing him away with a caster shell. Or at least I assume that's what he had done. But despite all that, it hasn't fixed everything for him. So, this pirate's question, at least initially, is, what's up with Hilda? And I feel like, you should just kind of rip the Band-Aid off. Like, Hilda's dead, so are the other pirates. Like, that's all you really can say, you know? Ooh, so things are getting a little dangerous, because, like, people are going to investigate the commotion. Well, I guess the pirate has decided better to cut his losses for now. It is notable that despite all of this, he's made it clear that, like, look, we're coming for that ship, whether you like it or not. And I guess it does make sense that such a precious, rare sort of thing would be a hot commodity. Ooh. Okay, so it seems like the pirates really busted up the shop, which is understandable, but I feel like this really only adds to the ever-increasing stack of large bills. At least Jim is sensible about this, saying, like, what is the assassin doing here? Like, I know you're after Jean and all that, but, like, why are you welcomed here? So, I get why Melfina's trusting Suzuka, but at the same time, she's giving a bit of a heads up, like, watch out, these pirates are after you, which, to be fair, it's nice to know that, but, I don't know. I feel like, trusting Suzuka is kind of a fool's errand, you know? Alright. At least Gilliam has the presence of mind to say, like, okay, this is an unknown person, why are you bringing him on board? It's interesting that Jim's effectively given her a visitor's pass. Like, she's not a crew member, just let her in for the time being. Ooh. So, notably, Jean doesn't know about the extra passenger. And I feel like, unfortunately, he's probably going to take the approach of shooting first and asking questions later. Okay, well, never mind. Jean's taking this in stride, I guess. The appearance of an assassin who has pledged to kill him, ain't no big deal. Although, given that he's collapsed, I suppose he's not feeling too well to begin with, so, maybe he's too injured to care, maybe he's banking on the idea that Suzuka wouldn't kill an injured man. Oh dear. No matter how you slice it, things are decidedly not good. Alright, well that's it for this episode. If you've enjoyed it, then by all means, tune in for the next one. See you, Space Cowboy.